والله يدعو إلى دار السلام ويهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Dear viewers, welcome back to another episode on the evolution of fiqh. As we used to do every time we go over a brief overview of what we had discussed in the previous episodes, today inshallah we'll make it very brief. We were talking about the fiqh and the different points that will help us understand fiqh in a better way and have a better understanding of fiqh. And we started by talking about the meaning of fiqh and the scope of this topic. Fiqh linguistically means the understanding of the religion, or the understanding. The word just means understanding. And in the terminology, it means understanding or knowing the detailed religious rulings from their scriptural evidence. We also talked about the scope of fiqh and how it covers and governs all the interactions, not only between we and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, between us and Allah, but also between us and His creation as well. When it comes to the interactions between us and Allah, this is called al-ibadat, acts of worship. But when it comes to the relationship between us and the people, then it's called al-mu'amalat, or interactions, or transactions. It could also have to do with our etiquettes with ourselves and others, so it's called etiquettes or adab. All of this is under the umbrella of fiqh, or the larger title of fiqh. We also talked about the importance of learning fiqh, and we said it's obligatory on us to learn how to stay away from the prohibitions and how to perform the duties and obligations. Extra knowledge is recommended but not necessary. We did talk about the source of fiqh and said that the revelation and the madhahib are not to add to the revelation or delete from the revelation. They work to compile the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ and understand it, classify it into chapters and titles and subtitles, simplify it for us, deduce rulings for things that were not present during the time of the Prophet ﷺ from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And we talked about our position from the madhahib, or what our position should be from the madhahib, to use them and benefit from that great heritage of ours without making them work as a divisive force in the ummah of ours, which should be always one ummah, united at all times. We talked about some of the legal principles, or in fact we covered briefly the 6 comprehensive major legal principles, because even though it is considered to be a specialized science, it has a great benefit to understand them and to apply them in our understanding of fiqh, and not only that, in our life in general. We talked about some of the fundamentals of jurisprudence, and we talked about the classification or categorization of rulings into 5 categories: mandatory, preferable, permissible, disliked, and the last one would be prohibited. I would like to mention here that the first 4 categories are permissible to do. So mandatory, preferable, permissible, and disliked. Even disliked, it is discouraged, but if you do it, you do not earn a sin. So it shows you that the area that is restricted, the restrictions in Islam are not too many. Let's talk about restrictions in food. What is restricted? What is restricted is pork, animals that have canine teeth and birds that have claws. But all the rest is permissible for us to eat. All vegetables, seafood, all other animals, domesticated animals, cattle, etc., sheep, all of this is allowable for us to eat. So the area of restriction is a small area. It is not a very large area. In fact, these categories are not proportionate in size, because the category of permissible, which is in the middle, is the largest of all of them, because we say that everything is permissible until proven otherwise. Everything is permissible until proven otherwise. So if you also take in consideration that the first four categories are allowable for us to do, and it is only the last categories that is restricted, which is the category of the prohibitions, you will know that you are not very restricted by Islam. Certainly, you're not giving a full liberty or freedom to do what you want. You're still Allah's abd, servant, worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're bound to abide by His decrees, His injunctions. So there is a certain degree of restriction, and you have to accept this. Freedom is not absolute. There is no freedom to take or not take what Allah gives you. You have to take what Allah gives you. And if you don't take what Allah gives you, you earn a sin. You become a sinner. Maybe we will not do anything for you in this life, depending on what kind of sin, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold everyone accountable for their deeds on the day of judgment. Allah is most forgiving, but that's not a license to violate the sacred zone of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is called His prohibitions. Now, the next point that we want to make clear here is that everything is permissible until proven otherwise. But does it apply to the acts of worship? No, it does not apply to the acts of worship. Well, you can make whatever contract, or you can even eat whatever you want, or you can sleep or wake up or drink or do whatever you want without a proof that this is allowable. But that does not apply to the acts of worship. It applies only to the worldly affairs. With regards to the acts of worship, in other words, your relationship with Allah, everything is restricted until the sanctity of it is established in the revelation. Why? Because to worship Allah, you have to worship Him as He likes. You cannot innovate, you cannot invent, you cannot make up an act of worship. You cannot say, I'll worship Allah by standing on, my head. That is not considered an act of worship. Whoever told you that Allah likes this, whoever told you that you can worship Allah by doing this, or this will earn you the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you cannot make up an act of worship. So everything is permissible to do until proven otherwise, but with regards to the acts of worship, you should not do anything and call it worship unless there is a proof in the religion. And that's the concept of following the sunnah versus innovating in the deen or following the bid'ah, innovation. Following the bid'ah is not accepted in the deen. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad." Whoever innovates in this affairs of ours, that which is not from it, shall be rejected. It shall be rejected. So you cannot make up things and call them acts of worship. Most of the people do not make up entire acts of worship. most of the people don't do this. They usually make up like, the form of the worship, or the number, or the time, or the place, or certain associations. They would tell you, Subhanallah is okay to say. Yeah, but to say Subhanallah on Tuesday after Al-Asr 250 times needs a proof. Is there any indication in the Quran or the Sunnah that I should say Subhanallah 250 times after Asr on Tuesdays? If there is no indication, then I should not do it as a regular practice and recommend it to the people. Because this would be innovating in the deen. Because you could innovate in the form, you could innovate in the number, you could innovate in the time, the place, or the associated acts with the worship. Not necessarily making up an entirely new act of worship, because that's not accepted by anyone. Our practice of the religion should be evidence-based. Our practice of the religion should be evidence-based. So whenever you're told to do something, you need to ask for the evidence. You need to know, why am I doing this? Is it pleasing to Allah? And if it is pleasing to Allah, Allah would have told you to do it. And Allah would have told you in one of two ways, in the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. There is only one conveyor and one legislator. The legislator is Allah. The conveyor is the Prophet ﷺ. So you have to go through that gate, the gate of the Prophet ﷺ. Going through any other gate will not earn you the pleasure of Allah. There is only one gate to Allah's pleasure. That is through the way of Muhammad ﷺ. Now, that does not mean that you cannot regulate your routine acts of worship in a way that's most suitable for you. Let's say it is most suitable for you to make Qiyam al-Layl every Tuesday because you have Wednesdays off. Then that's okay. Then you're not saying that Qiyam al-Layl on Wednesday night is better than, or the night of Wednesday is better than the night of Thursday. You're not saying that, but you're basically saying, I am off on Wednesday, therefore it's most suitable and convenient for me to make Qiyam al-Layl on Tuesdays, and that would not be an innovation. You're just regulating your worship to suit you and to be convenient. Therefore, what you have to make that distinction between innovating, which is prescribing something new in the religion, and doing it consistently to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and just regulating your own worship according to the way that is most convenient for you. There is certainly a difference between the two things. As far as innovation in the deen, we said that it is rejected in the deen. Any innovation is rejected. But this does not mean by any way that innovation in the dunya is rejected. We're only talking about innovation in the deen. Innovation in the dunya is recommended. To innovate in matters of medicine and cars and so on and so forth, it is recommended because that's seeking the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to seek. When we come back after the break, we will talk further about this issue. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Before the break, we were talking about innovations, and we were talking about the difference between innovating and regulating your own worship in a way that's convenient for you. And we also talked about the difference between innovating in the religion, which is forbidden, and innovating in matters of this life, such as in, chemistry, medicine, cars, planes, computers, etc., which is recommended because that's the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requested of us or required us to have as Muslims. We said that we have to follow an evidence-based practice of the religion. Our practice of the religion should be evidence-based. Before we do something, we have to make sure that it is actually liked by Allah from the revelation or according to the evidence. And that will lead us to talking about what is considered to be an evidence and what is not. Certainly there are many things that are considered as evidence. We will take the 4 most important of them. Some of these are controversial. These 4 are the most important, and they are not controversial according to the vast majority of the scholars. The first one is the Quran, the word of Allah, the spoken word of Allah. The second is the Sunnah. The third is the consensus. And the fourth one is analogy. The first one, the Quran, certainly that is the word of Allah. It's the direct speech of Allah. It's the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah speaks to us in the Quran, we will have to take it, we will have to accept it, we will have to act by it. The Quran should not serve as a source of blessing only for us. It is a source of blessing for us. We get blessed by reading the Quran, but what is most important is to understand and implement and live by Al-Quran in our entire lives. The second is the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and we will talk in more detail about the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because that Sunnah detailed the Quran, explained the Quran, made us have a better understanding of the Quran. That is why the Sunnah is the subject of an offensive attack by many forces and from many directions, people who do not intend good for this religion. Because without the Sunnah, the Quran becomes an undecipherable book. Certainly, there are many commands and prohibitions in the Quran, and there are many statements in the Quran that are very clear, but many of them do need explanation by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Even the Salah and the Zakah and the Hajj, etc. You know that these things are prescribed for us in the Quran, but you don't know how to do them. The Sunnah teaches us how to do them. The third evidence is consensus. Consensus of the Muslim scholars. Consensus of the Muslim scholars at one point of time would be an evidence, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, وَمَن يُشَقِّقِ الرَّسُولَ مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى. He who resists the messenger after guidance had been made clear to him and follow a path other than the path of the believers, we will let him follow his own path, and then we will subject him to the torment of the hellfire. Now, you should not follow a path other than the path of the believers. If the believers represented by the scholars, because certainly in matters of the religion, the common Muslims do not have the ability or the capacity to understand the Quran and Sunnah and deduce rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. This needs comprehensive knowledge, this needs accuracy, it needs also knowledge, extensive knowledge of the language of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Therefore, the public in these matters are represented by the scholars, and the agreement of the scholars on a matter at any point of time in the history of the Muslim Ummah would be ijma' or consensus, and would be an evidence on the matter referred to. So ijma' is a very important evidence, or a very important source of the sources of the Sharia, and according to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, this would be number 3. And it would even give strength to matters that have been established by the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Because the matters that have been mentioned in the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ could either be agreed upon or not agreed upon. If they are agreed upon, that's the ijma', that's the consensus, and these matters certainly will have more strength than the matters that are not agreed upon. We all agree upon the Dhuhr being 4 rak'ahs, the Maghrib being 3 rak'ahs. We all agree upon 5 prayers every day. We agree upon the fasting in the month of Ramadan. We agree upon the day of fasting ending by sundown. So there are many, many matters of agreements. Many people think that the matters of agreement are very few or very little. In fact, they are not. There are many matters of complete agreement between us Muslims. All of us Muslims, not only the scholars. Sometimes these matters are known by the public as well. Go wherever you want in the Muslim lands. Go to Indonesia, go to Malaysia, go to the Muslim communities in the West, Africa, Europe. You'll find the Muslims praying Dhuhr pretty much the same way. They all prostrate, they all bow, they all stand up, they all recite Al-Fatiha, and so on and so forth. These are all matters of agreement. These are all matters of consensus. Some of them are scholarly consensus only, not known to all the public, and some of them are known by the masses or the public, and they are considered practical consensus. So consensus is an important source of the sources of the rulings. The number 4, which is analogy, is a very important one as well. In the past, there has been a particular group of people who did not accept this as a source of rulings. These are called the Zahiriyya, and for those people, analogy was not considered one of the sources of the religion. However, the differences between the Zahiriyya and the rest of the Muslims, Zahiriyya would mean literalist. The difference between them and the rest of the Muslims is not so huge, because eventually they found a way to deal with the matters that have not been addressed in the Quran and the Sunnah, and deal with them without the use of al-qiyas. Maybe by using general principles, maybe by using general principles of the religion, such as la darara wa la dirar, no harm and no reciprocating of harm. So it ended up that in the major issues, or the most important issues, there was not really a huge difference between the literalists, which are Zahiriyya, and the rest of the scholars of Islam, including the 4 Imams, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Al-Shafi'i, and Ahmad. Analogy, what does analogy mean? It's making an analogy between 2 things. By reasoning, you have one issue that's been mentioned in the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and another thing that has not been mentioned because maybe it did not exist at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And then you say, well, this is like this, so since Allah made this prohibited, then this is also prohibited because it's just like it. Let's take an example. Now, we all know that wine is prohibited because it clouds your mind, it impairs your thinking and reasoning and judgment. Therefore, it is prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything that does the same thing, that clouds your mind and impairs your judgment, would be considered like it. So drugs, for instance, cocaine, and so on, are they prohibited or allowable? Are they permissible or certainly they are prohibited. They are certainly prohibited by agreement of the scholars. One of the ways to establish the prohibition is to say, since wine is prohibited, drugs are like wine in the sense that they cause impairment of judgment, impairment of thinking and reasoning. Therefore, all drugs are prohibited, just like wine is prohibited. So you have what they call a branch, a root, a reason of prohibition, and you have a ruling. You apply the ruling of the matter that's been mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah to the matter that was not mentioned, because it's a new matter, because both the branch and the root share the same qualities that made the first one prohibited or mandatory or whatever. Therefore, the branch will be joined to the root, or al-far'a and al-asl. So these are the main sources of rulings or tashri'ah: Quran, the Sunnah, ijma', consensus, and the last one would be analogy or analytic reasoning. The next point that we will talk about now, inshallah, is the Sunnah. Why are we talking about the Sunnah particularly and not starting by the Quran? Because most of us Muslims do acknowledge the authority of the Quran very well. The Quran is not subject to an offensive assault by others, because most of the people know that people will not accept any attack against the Quran. But those who want to change the deen, or those who want to attack the deen or alter the deen, they do this through attacking the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. There are many clear proofs on the authenticity and on the authority of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. One of these proofs is Allah's statement in the Quran, وَمَا أَتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Take that which the Prophet has given you and stay away or abstain from that which he prohibited you from. There is also Allah's statement in the Quran, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِيمَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Nay, by your Lord, they will not truly believe until they make you, Muhammad, judge concerning that over which they dispute among themselves, and then find within themselves no discomfort from what you have judged, and submit fully and willingly. When we come back the next time, inshallah, we will be talking about the classification of the Sunnah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.